Hey friend, if you're getting started playing with a band, or you have plans of playing with a band soon and that's something that you want to do, then you definitely need to dive into today's lesson with me. Imagine you're on the bandstand and it's time to start the next song. The whole band looks at you because you're supposed to count off. That's your job as the drummer, right? But your mind is totally blank. You don't remember the tempo, you don't remember how the song goes, you panic and you freeze. And you feel like the entire band and audience are all seeing into your soul. Everybody's staring at you and you don't know what to do. So you quickly count off the song anyways, hoping that you're close to at least the right tempo. Then, once you get going, the band falls apart and crashes and burns, and you realize that you were completely off with your tempo. Hey, I've been there. Trust me, this is a true story. You can't make this up. Let me help you avoid this scenario with my 5-step count-off confidence process that will have you nailing count-offs and never fearing song starts again. You can do this. Hey, welcome to the Non-Glamorous Drummer. I'm so glad you're hanging out today. I help self-taught beginner drummers know what to practice so that they can nail songs and become the musician that people want to have in their band. And hey, nailing count-offs is a huge part of that. And so that's why this topic deserves an entire lesson. Count-offs are terrifying, let's be honest. They're terrifying because we know that if we mess it up, we have the potential to completely train wreck the band and lose their trust, because our job as the drummer is to keep the time, and if we can't count off at the right tempo, we kind of feel like we're no good, right? It's almost like it doesn't matter if we can do everything else well if we can't count off a song. And the thing is, you can reference a visual metronome like on your phone. You can have a metronome flash at you on a music stand, and you can try to follow that, but it's still hard to match exactly, and you still feel kind of blind doing that. I've never done well with that, and I still feel scared counting off a song if I'm trying to follow a visual metronome. You can also try to remember how the song goes in your head, but what if it's a new song and the melody escapes you? That's what happened to me in that story. That was when I was playing with the high school worship band at my church, and I was basically a beginner drummer, trial by fire, thrown into playing with the worship band at church. I had no clue what I was doing, but hey, I learned quickly because I failed over and over and over again. And this was definitely a big fail. One Sunday morning, I had to count off a song where the whole band came in together, big loud intro, and it was an 80 beats per minute or so song, and I just blanked on how the song went and just blindly pss, pss, pss. And as soon as we start going, I realized, good grief, I'm like 115 beats a minute, like way past 80. And so what did we do? Well, things kind of like tripping down the stairs. And then when the band dropped out for the verse, that actually ended up being a really good thing, because even though we kind of tumbled down, the singer started singing and naturally slowed down a whole bunch, just him and his guitar singing the verse. And then we all settled into it and we all kind of had a laugh, and terribly embarrassing for me. But I had to learn, all right, I got to make these mistakes and I got to fail at this stuff. That way I learn. And so that inspired me to get a lot better at counting off songs. And so I had to develop a system for doing it. And so that system is what I'm teaching you today. You can learn to count off accurately without a metronome on hand and without even remembering how the given song goes. Anybody can learn this method with a little bit of patience, including you. Patience is the key. You can't do this overnight. You can't even get this done in a week. It's going to take time to do this, but if you're patient with it, you can get really solid with count-offs. And of course, your future self thanks you. So let's do it. Before we get into this, though, I have a free gift for you in the description I want to make sure you grab. If you're having trouble knowing what to practice, no matter what level you're at, if you just feel scattered and you feel like you're always trying to practice a little of that and a little of this and a little of that, but you're not really growing, then you need to grab my Know What to Practice 3-part practice guide for the busy drummer. If you've just got 30 minutes a day, this shows you the exact components that you need to have consistently in your practice sessions to make sure that you're hitting all the key areas and your practice is balanced, and that way you're really growing. This is my most popular e-guide. It's helped out so many students just because of there's so much information there, but you can pick and choose what are the things I need to work on and basically create your custom practice plan and have confidence that, hey, this is valuable stuff. You're doing an 80-20 essentially. You're taking the 20% that's going to give you the 80% of results, so you save a whole bunch of time, you grow really fast, you know what to practice, and so you have more fun on the drums. So total no-brainer. It's a free PDF guide. Go grab it in the description below. The Know What to Practice 3-part practice guide. Okay, let's get into this. My 5-step count-off confidence process. Be ready to take notes. If you want to type some of these out, get a piece of paper and a pen. Ultimately, this will involve a lot of writing and thinking because you have to. This is very actionable and practical, and there's homework here. There's stuff you got to do in order to do this. This isn't just watch Steven's video and then cool, I'm done with that. This is a process. There's a reason why I call it a process, a method, but we can boil this down to very specific steps, and you can accomplish the first two right now today. All right, step one. I want you to make a written list of all your favorite songs that you can sing in your head right now. These can be any songs from any genre. The only rule is that you must know them to the extent that you will always remember how the chorus goes. So we're talking songs from your childhood, songs you loved as a teenager, songs that you've heard so many times you can't possibly forget them. That's what's important here, because what we're relying on is your long-term memory. Okay, I will never forget how the chorus of Don't Stop Believing goes. Probably never forget the verse either. So that's a song to put on the list. Just a tip here, go to some top 40 charts on Spotify or Apple Music, wherever you listen to music, and look at hits by the decade or, top 40 hits for some ideas. For instance, a lot of my students are older than me. A lot of them grew up in the 70s and 80s, and so those might be the decades of music that you know the best. So go to a 70s hits playlist and see, oh yeah, I know that song. Oh yeah, I'll never forget that song. Oh yeah. And so that can be a great spot to start. So make a written list and see if you can get 10, 15, 20 songs on this list, songs that you know by heart, that you know really well. Then you're ready for step two. Calculate the tempo of 10 to 15 of these songs. So let's say you came up with like 20 just now. That's fantastic. 20 songs that you know by heart that you'll never forget how they go. Well, calculate the tempo of 10 of these. Grab a metronome. You can grab a free metronome, whether it's the Soundbrenner metronome app. Doesn't matter. Pretty much all of these, they have the tap tempo feature, so you can be listening to something while you're there in the metronome app. You can be tapping it to figure out the tempo, and then from there, get it playing until the metronome syncs up with the song. Now, if you're doing this with a 70s song or a 60s song, if it's a Zeppelin or a Beatles song, they didn't record to a click. So there's not going to be an exact tempo, and it might speed up a little, it might slow down a little. It might be like September by Earth, Wind and Fire, where it starts at I think it starts at 115 and speeds up to 128 or something. I don't remember the exact numbers. And so it's kind of all over the place. So there are certain songs you just can't use. Don't use September for a tempo reference. You could use the beginning of it for a tempo reference, but it gradually speeds up. Know that. As you get into 80s, 90s, more new music, you'll find stuff that was definitely recorded to a click. And so it's a much more solid tempo, and you know exactly what that number is. But do the best you can and calculate the tempo of 10, maybe 15 of those songs on your list and write down those tempos. So you've got your list of all these songs you know by heart. You're writing next to each of these a tempo number. You're learning to associate that tempo number with that song title. So step three, and this is where we're going beyond what you can accomplish right now today. We're thinking long term. We can gradually add onto this list. What I want you to do is continue adding songs to this list until you have most tempo numbers between 60 beats per minute and 150 beats per minute represented. Now, the more the better. If you're able to pull this off with 25 songs, like if you've got such an even spread of tempos in 25 songs, fantastic. You've got like 2 songs that are in the 60s and 2 songs that are in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 100s, 120, so on. Great. Odds are you're going to need closer to 50 songs on your list to make sure you've got something that's 102, something that's 108 and 113 or 120. And there are certain tempos that you tend to find more often, like with a lot of dance songs, those are around 120, the people's tempo, as it said. If you play in church a bunch, you do a lot of modern worship, so many of those songs are in the upper 60s, low 70s. So it's funny, depending on genre, you have certain tempos represented a lot. The funk tempo is like 90. So a lot of times if there's a funky beat, it's like 90 to 100. Superstition by Stevie Wonder is 100. And so you'll find Lovely Day by Bill Withers, I think it's about 105. And so you'll find that certain genres have certain spots they tend to live. And so sometimes it's hard to find songs that aren't in those specific spots. So do the best you can. If you can go across a few different genres, remember you're thinking through songs that I know really well. It's not as hard as it sounds when you give this some time. You're going to find that, you know what? There really are like 50, 70, 100 songs that I will never forget how the chorus goes because you've heard so much music over the years. Think back to when you were a teenager. Think back just the last few years. What songs have you heard a bunch? Gradually add onto this list and give this some time. This isn't something you've got to accomplish today or even this week. just have this list handy. Maybe it's a Google Doc, it's a note on your computer, a note on your phone, it's written on paper, it's on a whiteboard, whatever, where you're gonna see it all the time and where you can just, oh yeah, I just remembered that song I know really well. Let me write that down. So you're gradually adding on to the list until you have as many of these tempo numbers represented. Ideally, there's no tempo gap of more than like 5 beats per minute. So let's say you've got a song that's 111 and a song that's 120. Ideally, you need a song that's like 115. So you've got something that's there in between. So you've roughly got, 5 BPM increments. But again, the more the better, but just know that this is a process. It'll take some time, but there's more songs that you know by heart than you think. Whatever songs you know the melody of the chorus and can sing it in your head, no matter what, you'll never forget. Now, the reason why I want you to keep this list handy and keep it on your phone, on a piece of paper, on a door, on the wall, whatever, is because step 4, I want you to memorize these tempo numbers. That way, whenever you think of that particular song you know by heart, you immediately know its tempo. And likewise, when you see a tempo or you think of a tempo, you immediately think of that song that's that tempo or closest to it. That's what's important here. So make a spreadsheet, make a list, make index cards, whatever works for you. I know not everybody is a numbers person. That's okay. Maybe you want to color code. I think a really cool way to do this is make a spreadsheet. And in my mind, different numbers have different colors. And so if I were doing this all over again, I'd have a spreadsheet, and any songs that are in the 70s, those are blue, because 7 is blue. And so if it's 72 beats per minute, 79 beats per minute, that's blue. So I'm going to at least remember those are blue, and then that'll help me remember the exact tempo. The 80s are like a pinkish red. So there we go. We can color code that. 90s are green. 100s are just a grayish black. 110s are a lighter gray. 120s are a dark blue. 130s are a pinkish red again. So whatever you got to do, as silly as it sounds, do what works for you. If you just need to have index cards, if you need to write it all out on the wall where you see it all the time, do whatever you got to do, because this is the critical step. You have to remember these tempo numbers. And so be patient with this, but when you practice remembering it, when you can't sleep at night, you can. I remember doing this in high school. Laying in bed, I couldn't sleep, so I would go through, all right, 70 beats per minute. How many songs can I think of? 71 beats per minute. How many songs can I think of? There would be some gaps. 85 beats per minute. Oh yeah, that song. 90 beats a minute. Oh yeah, that song. And so I would practice going through the list. And so what you can also do is have a spreadsheet that's sorted either by, songs, but sorted by the tempo numbers. And that's why I say color coding some of the numbers, so that you're remembering, you're able to go to a number and then remember a song, not just the song and then the number, but more importantly, the number and then the song. Because that's the critical thing. Maybe you can see where we're going with this. Because step 5, let's say you're playing with a band. Maybe it's the worship band at church like it was for me. Maybe it's a cover band. But have all the songs that your band is playing written out in some form or fashion. Maybe you've got shorthand charts you've written, or maybe it's just a set list. Maybe it's the Sunday set list, maybe it's the Friday night cover set list, and this might be 5 songs, this might be 30 songs, but have them all on a piece of paper. There's your set list, and with that list are the corresponding tempos. The key here is that you have to at least know, you have to have written down for you the tempo number for all these songs. That way, when it comes time to count off, when you see a BPM number, and so you say, all right, hey, everybody, we're playing this song, you look at your set list, cool, okay, it's 109 beats a minute. You see 109, you think, oh yeah, that song I know by heart, that's 109, awesome. And you're good to go, and you're super solid with it because you've got that song playing in your head. And the thing is, we humans, we remember melody and we grab onto melody so well. We're not robots, and so none of us have perfect tempo, and none of us can just remember a tempo, right? Like, if you can't just blindly remember a tempo. I know I can, maybe you can. I can't, I'm human, but I can remember a melody. And when I get a melody going in my head, that's pretty reliable. That's pretty predictable. I'm going to remember how that song goes and how it sounds because I've heard it a million times. And then when I count off, it's going to be pretty close. Maybe it's not dead on, but you're going to be within 2 or 3 beats per minute if you follow this method. And so something else you can do, with technology these days, we've got set lists on iPads, charts on iPads. You can have a searchable list of all these song tempos. If you made a spreadsheet, you could have that handy on your iPad, searchable in the moment. So, okay, the band's counting off this song, which is 70 beats per minute. Type in 70 into your spreadsheet. Oh yeah, all these songs, I remember how these go. And there you are at 70 beats a minute. Also, one last tip I want to leave you with. If all else fails, if you're playing a gig this weekend and you don't have time to get this whole thing together, or if it's still a total brain freeze, you're in the hot seat, you're finding yourself just unable to think clearly in the moment. It happens to all of us. Until you get really comfortable playing with bands and gigging, there's going to be these moments of freeze ups. It's okay. Eventually, they won't happen anymore. You'll get to where you're able to think clearly in the heat of the moment. But let's say all else fails. Just ask the band to help you. Ask the band to help you remember the tempo. Believe me, they're more forgiving than you think. That's something that I didn't learn to do for years. I think it's kind of a humility thing. You know, when I was getting started playing in high school, I wouldn't call it an ego, but it was more of, I'm going to figure out how to do this. I'm going to do this myself so that nobody has to help me. I need to get good at this. That was kind of the mindset. And so that was a big driving force behind this that helped me figure all this out and get to where I could count off songs reliably. But later on, years later, I was playing with a cover band. This was like 5-6 years ago. And we weren't playing to a click, but we had a set list of like 60 songs. And so we would, I would count off songs a lot of times. And so I was kind of using the same method for doing that. But a lot of times the tempos that this band would do weren't exactly what the tempos were on my charts. They weren't the original tempos of the recordings. And so what I would do is I'd sit here and like, okay, Lovely Day, Bill Withers. That was one that they liked doing slower than the record. So as I played in my head, Lovely Day, boom, 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 boom. Okay, there's the tempo. So I'll kind of go like this and get the band, watching my hands. And they say, oh, a little bit slower. Everybody's playing it through their head because the bass player remembers that riff. Everybody remembers how the song goes. Even if you're blanking, they all remember. At least one of them's going to remember. And so they're like, okay, a little slower. Okay, cool. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you confidently go into it because collectively, you've all got the tempo right. Like, one of you might be thinking a little faster, or one might be thinking a little slower, but if you average out what everybody's thinking, you're going to get it right. And so I want you to remember that too. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. If you need help from the band, just ask them. Say, all right, here's the tempo I'm thinking. Does it sound about right to y'all? A little fat? Okay, cool. All right, here we go. It doesn't have to all be on you. Yes, it's your job to count off. Sometimes a lead singer would rather count off. Sometimes a guitar player will count off and just go 1, 2, 3, 4, and maybe you do a little fill into it. So sometimes that's the way a band operates. It all depends. But just know all the pressure isn't on you, but this is something that you need to get solid at and do the best you can with. And also this really strengthens your sense of time when you're able to remember tempos by remembering melodies. And so here's what to expect as you take action on this. Looking down the road, you won't have to fear the scariest part of being a drummer with a band. At least I always thought it was the scariest part, counting off songs. You don't have to fear it anymore because now you've got confidence that you can do it. And if all else fails, you're going to ask the band around you. You're going to do it. It's okay. You won't have to constantly make tempo corrections once you've started a song because you'll start it at the right tempo. You won't always have to be thinking, this might be too fast. Let's see if we can slow down, or this is too slow. Okay, we got to push, because those kinds of corrections, sometimes they're inevitable, but we want to avoid them when possible. And you can be confident that the band is in good hands as you lead them, because your job as the drummer is to lead the band time-wise. And so the more steady and reliable and confident you can be with your count-offs, the more the band's going to trust you. That's something really important. As a drummer, you have to have the band's trust. If they don't trust you, then you will not be a tight band, because they're going to be trying to dictate the time themselves instead of letting you dictate it and them gluing themselves to you. I've played in situations like this where maybe a piano player is kind of doing his own thing and he's trying to lay down the tempo and he's not listening to me. And so I'm trying to follow him, but he's not completely steady. And so environments like that, it's difficult to be a great, tight sounding band that's got a great feel and a great groove when everybody isn't looking to one singular source of time, whatever that source is, which generally needs to be the drums. So the more you can gain the band's trust and be consistent with your count-offs, be really solid with your time, the more they're going to trust you, the more they're going to enjoy playing with you, and the better the band's going to sound. And that's pretty important. So, hey, before you go, question for you. Will you take the plunge and do this 5-step process? I know statistically, a lot of you will watch this and you'll be like, cool, these are great ideas, but you probably won't actually do it. And I'm not judging you for it. This isn't for everybody right now. Maybe you'd like to play with a band one day, and so maybe you're thinking, okay, I'll come back to this later. This is good stuff, but it's not my focus right now. And maybe that's a wise choice for you. Maybe you shouldn't focus on this right now. Maybe you need to work on your hand technique. Maybe you need to work on your coordination and then think about the musical stuff of playing with a band and what all you're going to need to work on in order to do that a year from now. But maybe you know that this is a weak spot. If you're playing with a band regularly, you're playing at your church regularly, odds are this is something you need to do. So, will you take me up on this challenge? Will you do it? Know that it won't happen overnight, but if you commit the next month or few months to this and you're gradually growing your song list of songs you know by heart, you're working on memorizing the numbers, you will be amazed at what happens and you'll get really good at counting off songs, I promise. So, be sure to grab that 3-part practice guide. If you're having trouble knowing what to practice and you want to make sure you're growing steadily, your hands are growing, your coordination's growing, your ear is growing, be sure to grab that guide. It's going to help you out a whole bunch, especially if you're busy and you've just got 30 minutes a day. It's the 30-minute a day practice guide for busy drummers so that you know what to practice and you grow like crazy. All right, thanks so much for hanging out today. It's been a lot of fun. As always, stay non-glamorous. Know that you can do this. Even if you feel like you can't, it feels daunting. This is all about taking small steps. You can accomplish this. You can get really good at count-offs. I believe in you. I hope you do too. All right, I'll see you on the next lesson.